I have collected and gone through every single Miyazaki interview, reading all 700 of his answers one by one, and I discovered an insane amount of information about future games currently in development. If you want to read and analyze it all yourself, there is a link in the description. I even found a FromSoftware employee on LinkedIn who is working on an unannounced project. Of course, a big part of this video will be my assumptions and speculations, but I believe I've got a pretty good idea of what's coming next. First, let's talk about a new Souls game, possibly coming in 2025. Back in June 2022, 4Gamer asked Miyazaki,
Can you tell us what you, as a director, are aiming for next? With Elden Ring being a culmination of your work, is there anything you are interested in or would like to try in the future?
As a director, I'm already working on the next title, so I'll avoid any spoilers about that. But if we're talking long-term, I'd like to take on a fantasy with a higher level of abstraction than in past works.
Abstraction? It's a bit hard to picture what you mean.
Throughout the process of making fantasy action RPGs like Elden Ring, I've accumulated ideas and images that don't quite fit that format. At some point, I'd like to release all of those in a single project.
when asked if this more abstract fantasy would be similar to Deracine, his smaller, more personal project, Miyazaki said,
Honestly, when I let my personal interests run wild, it probably wouldn't be great for business. That's why I'd like to leave the titles that support the company to the newer, younger directors, while I quietly work on more personal niche projects on the side. We're also increasing our staff and building a new structure with that goal in mind.
So contrary to popular belief, the next game isn't going to be this abstract fantasy. It seems that as of June 2022, development on that project hadn't even started. This means the next game is likely gonna be specifically an action RPG, and that means it's going to be a new Souls game. In June 2024, we got some new key details about the next FromSoftware game through a PC Gamer interview. They asked Miyazaki,
What is missing from your ideal fantasy RPG?
It's hard to say without giving spoilers for my next idea or our next games. But I think one thing that's not necessarily missing, but makes it difficult to achieve my ideal, is that when I play it, I know everything's going to happen. I already know everything that's going on. So in terms of enjoying the game from a player's perspective, I'd love to not know that, and for somebody else to make my ideal fantasy game, please, if possible. Then I can enjoy it just as a player.
How would you ideally enjoy your own game more as a player?
That'd be the dream. To self-induce amnesia and enjoy the game I created myself. But I might get really angry and break the controller or something. Maybe it's not a good idea.
it's a really interesting answer. Miyazaki says his deep knowledge of the game stops him from enjoying his own games. But the next game might somehow solve this problem, which he didn't share because of spoilers. So, there must be some of game mechanic that lets you enjoy the game even if you know everything about it. Maybe there is some elements of randomness. In another interview, The Guardian specifically asked,
Have you made your dream game yet?
Let's just say for the record that I am planning on making that game.
Stay with me, it will all connect into one big picture. One of the most crucial piece of information and the last piece of the puzzle regarding the next game comes from a June 2024 CNET interview.
What lessons from Elden Ring will influence future FromSoftware games?
Traditionally, we've always liked the higher difficulty curve type of games and experiences. But I think that nature in and of itself alienates a portion of the game-playing audience, whereas Elden Ring succeeded in casting a wider net, but at the same time keeping that core, high learning curve. I'm not saying an open-world game or experience is necessarily the answer, but I think it's the degree of freedom and the amount of freedom that we give players that helps balance or offset that difficulty curve, and makes the game more accessible and engaging for a certain player demographic. So I think that combination between freedom and difficulty will become a big hint in whatever it is we do next.
So, here's what we know so far. First, The next game is going to be an action RPG, basically another Souls game. Second, it's going to be challenging, but with a strong focus on freedom, serving as a balancing mechanism for the difficulty. Third, the game will have insane replayability. Even someone like Miyazaki, who knows everything about it, can still enjoy playing it. Now, about the development start. Back on December 29, 2018, Miyazaki stated that there are two unannounced titles in development, which turned out to be Elden Ring and Armored Core. So, this new game's development likely started sometime between early 2019 and 2022. Judging by FromSoftware's tendency to start new projects when others are nearly finished, I speculate that development kicked off a few months after Sekiro release, late 2019, January 2020. By the way, I created a graph of every single FromSoft release, made from data gathered from interviews. It's fascinating to see some interesting patterns here, like how close the first Elden Ring leak was to the game development start. I'll leave a link in the description. Typically, titles like Dark Souls 3 or Sekiro take about 3 years to make, while huge projects like Elden Ring took an enormous 6 years. This new game seems to be quite different from Dark Souls and Elden Ring, and considering that FromSoftware now has 4 to 6 games in development simultaneously, I don't think they allocated as many resources to this game as they did for Elden Ring. So, I'm speculating a maximum of 6 years of development time. By that logic, the release date could be around summer-fall 2025. I'd say we might get a trailer either at TGA 2024 in December or sometime during February or March 2025. Now, let's try to predict what the next game will be about. There are several trends in how Souls games evolve, so let's discuss them. First, we have the main branches of Souls game, which slowly but surely increment the Souls formula. Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1 and 3, and finally Elden Ring. Then, the other side steps, games that branch off and do something different, something unique, like Bloodborne and Sekiro. It seems like every other game is a side step, so the next Souls game might also be one that branches from the main formula. Every Souls game is faster than the previous one, but the branching side steps games are even faster. Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1 are the slowest. Bloodborne is faster than Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring, and Sekiro is even faster than that. Even Armored Core, which shouldn't really be included in this list, confirms the trends. It's even faster than Sekiro. We can see this trend in each DLC too. DLC bosses are always faster than the base game ones, so I can say for sure the next game is going to be very fast paced. Now about the combat. These side-step games often radically change how combat works. Dark Souls 1 was about slow-paced combat, where you wait for your opportunity behind a shield. Bloodborne is a game where an aggressive playstyle is the only viable one. Sekiro took an even bigger sidestep and changed the fundamentals even more. Now, the best way to deal with an attack is not to dodge it, but to deflect it. So, if I had to bet, the new Souls game is going to branch so far away from the main branch that many people will stop calling it Souls or Souls-like. Each new game is more focused on parry than the previous one. Parry in Dark Souls 1 was useless, only one boss in the game was parryable. Parry in Dark Souls 3 was useful. And in Elden Ring they added several new parry skills, which can parry at a distance or even parry spells. They even added a Sekiro-like deflect tier. On the other hand, these side-step games are changing how parry system works. Bloodborne has a gun parry system at range, and in Sekiro, parry is the main mechanic. So I wouldn't be surprised if the next game has some sort of new parry mechanic, like spell parrying or parrying with your armor or rolls. Often, the next game is foreshadowed in the previous game's DLC, like in Artorias of the Abyss. There is Marvelous Chester, who came from another time, which is obviously a reference to Bloodborne. Yamamura from the Old Hunter is famous for being a piece of foreshadowing for Sekiro. The painting from ashes of Leyndell could be a clever foreshadowing for the creation of the Elden Ring. Rated Oscar has a great video discussing this. Just watch it, it's good. So what NPC could foreshadow the next game? If we choose an NPC from Shadow of the Erdtree that stands out the most, it has to be Dry of Dan. So maybe the focus of the next game is going to be on hand-to-hand combat and different style of martial arts. Or maybe it could be a Sekiro-like successor, or even both, deflecting with palms, redirecting opponent's attack. That would be awesome. Sekiro is the only one of the Souls games that did not receive DLC. And judging by its huge success and player base love, I've collected Steam review data and Sekiro is currently top 1 by player perception. So it's only natural that the next game is going to be a Sekiro formula successor, an increment to the formula. Now, let's talk about new games being directed by others at FromSoftware. There is a lot of information from interviews about this, but I don't want to waste your time and read every single one to you. If you are interested, I'll show the full interviews on screen, so feel free to pause and read them. First off, since 2018, Miyazaki has mentioned 7 times about the idea of other people than him in the company leading their own projects. He believes it's important for fresh ideas to come from different directors within the team. Additionally, we can extract a surprising amount of information from Miyazaki's interviews about new games directed by others at FromSoftware. Here's what I've gathered: that he won't interfere with these new projects, he won't be the main vision behind them, nor will he take responsibility for these titles. He won't even take a supervisor role. The new directors will have full creative control, just like Miyazaki had during the development of Dark Souls 1 and Demon's Souls. He has repeatedly referred to this new director as young. Elden Ring specifically gave this director the skills they needed. Miyazaki mentioned how the team grew in terms of experience because of the Elden Ring. Before that, FromSoftware didn't have team leads. Miyazaki directly spoke to every team member. During Dark Souls 3 and Sekiro, they had one co-director, Yui Tanimura, but that was it. In Elden Ring, there were an additional 10 directors. Now, Miyazaki doesn't work directly with every single employee like he worked before. He works with directors, and they work with their teams. Titles by this new young director are going to be fairly safe options. They are going to sell well and focus on a wider audience, while Miyazaki will focus on experimental type of games, like Duracine. He said,
I'd like to leave the titles that support the company to the newer, younger directors, while I quietly work on more personal, niche projects on the side. We're also increasing our staff and building a new structure with that goal in mind. In addition to the titles I'm directing, we're also developing several titles led by other directors, but it's not the right time to talk about them in detail just yet. I apologize, but I'd ask for a little more time.
Miyazaki has mentioned numerous times that this marks the beginning of the
so-called new from software, as well as the types of games that we will be developing in the future. Through developing Elden Ring, I think a lot of our talent, including directors who are not me or game designers, it really served as a kind of foundation for us to build upon and grow into the next stage as a company.
Not all new games will focus on overcoming challenges and difficulty. Some directors will have different visions and values. FromSoftware will leverage the trust we have in their brand to sell new games. The best example is Armored Core 6. For me, this game didn't look appealing at first. I wouldn't have played if it wasn't a FromSoftware game, but I had trust in them. And what happened? I am a huge fan now. This game is one of the greatest I've ever played, and it probably has the best story I've ever experienced in a video game. If you haven't played and think you are not a mecha genre fan, Give it a try anyway, it's just that good. 8. This new game will be smaller than Elden Ring. As of December 29, 2018, none of these new games were in development, but by June 24, 2022, there were already several titles that are directed by other people than Miyazaki. So we already have 3 or 4 games directed by new, younger directors that have been in development for about 3 years. The announcement should be soon. Now, let's theorize who will create the new games, when they will release, and how they will look. Let's go with a pessimistic assumption, a minimal scenario, that there are only 3 games in development which aren't directed by Miyazaki. First, one of these games is definitely another Armored Core, directed by Masaru Yamamura, probably another game from the 6th generation on the same engine with similar mechanics. I have 3 reasons to believe this. FromSoftware recently hired new staff, and in their job posting they specifically mentioned they wanted candidates who are experienced in character and mecha design, and that people with expertise in mecha design are welcome. Also that applicants must understand the concept of the game and the role of the characters and mecha. So they're clearly gearing up for more mecha projects. Now, this is the weakest evidence, and it might not mean much, but I'll mention it anyway. On the LinkedIn profile of one of the FromSoft employees, in the experience section it says that the development has not yet ended. He is still working till present on this game. And finally, that's what FromSoftware has always done with Armored Core games. Each generation has multiple titles. They did this even when they weren't as successful as they are now. So it makes sense they would continue the trend. So if I had to guess, development started near the end of Armored Core 6, and it will take up to 3 years of development. That means the release date should be around summer 2026. Second, I really hope the next game will be a new Souls game directed by Yui Tanimura. It's time for redemption for Dark Souls 2. Tanimura is extremely talented and has a lot of experience. He co-directed Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring. If he creates a new original Souls game without any development and setting restrictions like during TS2, it could be one of the best FromSoftware games ever. We need this redemption for Tanimura. If this is true, it's hard to pin down the timeline, but on another FromSoft employee's LinkedIn profile, there is a mention of a new unannounced project, development of which started in early 2022, right after Elden Ring, which Tanimura directed. If we assume it would take up to 5 years of development, then the release date should be around early 2026. Third, there is a new game that not focused on difficulty. It's going to be directed by one of these people. It's impossible to predict who exactly, since there is not much info about them on the internet. I found an interview where Masaki Yamagiwa said he wanted to create his own games, so I immediately thought he might be that young new director. But unfortunately he left FromSoftware and started working on Rise of the Ronin. So this game is going to be something unique, something so special for this young director that he broke the usual trend of creating games about overcoming challenges. The development of this game should have started between 2018 and 2022. Let's assume it started in the second half of 2021. By this logic, it should release somewhere late 2026, early 2027. There are also 2 other games directed by Miyazaki that I haven't discussed yet. Earlier, I predicted a new Souls game coming in mid-2025, but there is mention of one more game and hints about another. Let's talk about this new abstract fantasy game. From the interviews we can gather a few things. First, this game is going to be a fantasy with a higher level of abstraction than his past works. So, expect the story and plot to be more convoluted and harder to grasp. Second, it's not going to be an action RPG. Miyazaki compared it to Déraciné in terms of uniqueness. Third, it won't be an adventure game like Déraciné either. It's going to be a niche project that might not guarantee high sales. Again, much like the Resine was. Judging by an interview on June 24, 2022, Miyazaki either hadn't started or was just planning on the development of this project at that time. So, the release isn't around the corner. If I had to guess, maybe development started in mid-2023, and we might see it released in early to mid-2028. The existence of another game directed by Miyazaki was hinted in an interview with Famitsu, February 2024.
Do you still have the desire to create games on the scale of Elden Ring?
Yes, I do. I can't say if it's something I can get to right away, but if I am allowed, I want to try. The staff and everyone probably feel the same, but we want to take advantage of this experience we had with Elden Ring. But rather than that, and above all, creating huge worlds and adventures is amazingly fun. It thrills me.
So Miyazaki and everyone at FromSoftware want to create another huge open world game like Elden Ring. Development hadn't started yet during that interview, but it's clearly in their plans. Now, there is a pattern here. FromSoftware usually starts developing a main game right before another main game is released. So if this game is truly in the works, I suspect development will start somewhere near the end of the new Souls game, that is, around the first half of 2025. Following that logic, 6 years from then, the release date of this new massive Elden Ring-like game would be around the second half of 2030, or the first half of 2031. And that's it. That's everything useful from all of Miyazaki's interview that relates to new FromSoftware games.
What more do you want from me?
But there's one more related topic that's worth discussing here. One big elephant, or rather, beast in the room. The Bloodborne. Bloodborne is coming back. It's obvious. The real question is when, and in what form. Let's start with evidence. There is an insane amount of supporting clues for new Bloodborne content in Miyazaki's interviews. Listen carefully to this.
Can you comment on the possibility of a Bloodborne sequel?
Unfortunately, and I've said this in other interviews, it's not in my place to talk about Bloodborne specifically. We simply don't own the IP at FromSoftware. For me personally, it was a great project, and I have a lot of great memories for that game, but we're not at liberty to speak to it. I'm very sorry about that.
Did you notice that? If not, there is another example when GameSpot asked about adding Challenge Dungeon into Bloodborne 2.
Maybe in a Bloodborne 2?
Bloodborne 2? Unfortunately, it's not up to me.
See? See what I mean? Miyazaki didn't say no. If a Bloodborne sequel or remake or whatever wasn't happening, why wouldn't he just say so? It's almost feel like he is under an NDA or he was just asked by Sony not to share any information about an upcoming Bloodborne game. The same thing happened in Eurogamer interview, where Miyazaki just dodged the question.
Possibility of a Bloodborne remake.
Bloodborne is a title we hold very dear and just as much as our fans.
And finally, listen to this newest interview.
Bloodborne on PC when?
I know for a fact these guys want a Bloodborne PC port. If I say I want one, I'll get in trouble as well. But it's nothing I'm opposed to.
Would you like to see Bloodborne come to PC?
Obviously, as one of the creators of Bloodborne, my personal, pure, honest opinion is I'd love more players to be able to enjoy it. Especially as a game that is now coming of age, one of those games of the past that gets lost on older hardware. I think any game like that, it'd be nice to have an opportunity for more players to be able to experience that and relive this relic of the past. So, as far as I'm concerned, that's definitely not something I'd be opposed to.
See? He is not opposed to it, and he specifically mentioned that he and his team would love to do it. He said it in a tone that makes it seem like it's something they often discuss among themselves, like it's a popular topic in the FromSoftware office. Another big piece of evidence pointing toward new Bloodborne content is the sheer numbers of leaks. There is an absurd amount, even from credible sources. I would really surprised if they all collectively made it up. There is a guy named Flanov, which collected all the Bloodborne leaks up to October 2021. He found all 46 leaks and rumors about an upcoming Bloodborne game. Isn't that crazy? And that was 2 years ago. Since then, there have been countless more leaks. Many of these come from credible people who have proven themselves by predicting other things accurately. Okay, now that we know something Bloodborne related is likely coming, the question is, what could it be? I see 3 possibilities. First, a complete Bloodborne remake by a separate studio, like how Bluepoint did with Demon's Souls. Personally, I would hate that, but it's still a decent possibility. Second, just a remaster with upgraded textures, particle and lighting, like what they did with Dark Souls Remastered, possibly followed by a PC port. For me, this is the best option. It would revitalize PvP, discussions and lore hunting would be active again without breaking anything important, unlike with the Demon's Souls remake. Plus, many people on PC who couldn't play before would get to experience it now. It's the perfect option. The third option, a new Bloodborne game, probably not by FromSoftware. This worries me because it's a real possibility. They could tarnish Bloodborne's reputation like Dark Souls 2 did for the Dark Souls series. Bloodborne is a complete package. There is almost no room for a sequel here. They would ruin it, 100%. But there is a small chance that FromSoftware and Miyazaki would be in charge of this hypothetical sequel, but I really doubt it. If I had to choose what I want the most, it's definitely the second option, a remaster with a PC port. But if I had to bet on what's most likely, then it's the first option, a complete remake. And I even think I know the release date. It's really easy. It's coming as a launch title for the PS6, which is probably releasing in 2028. PS3 had Demon's Souls, PS4 had Bloodborne, PS5 had Demon's Souls Remake. Now Sony wants a PS6 exclusive, and it's going to be a Bloodborne. And if that's true, then I have a really bad news for PC gamers. There is a decent chance it's going to be a PS6 exclusive. I've seen many people arguing against the existence of Bloodborne remake or remaster, saying it's not profitable for Sony. But that's just stupid. Until Dawn sold 4 million copies, and Demon's Souls sold less than 2 million copies. Both of these games got their respective remakes. Now imagine, Bloodborne. It sold almost 8 million copies, and that was only on one console, the PS4. Sekiro and Dark Souls 3 both sold 10 million copies, but they were on every platform. Imagine how much Bloodborne could sell if it was ported to PC and Xbox. It could rival even the Elden Ring. But Sony did the most Sony thing ever imaginable, but not monetizing the insane popularity of Bloodborne yet. But they will. They will. In 2028. Just wait. Bloodborne is coming. It's coming. It's coming. For sure.